Cambridge interviews are shrouded in mystery. So if you've either got one coming up or you're just curious to know what the interviews are actually like, keep watching for some spicy inside scoop. I did psychological and behavioural sciences at Emmanuel College, so I'll be offering my own perspective on my interview. But I'm also going to enlist the help of a few friends who went to Emmanuel College with me, all doing different subjects, so it'll be good to get their perspectives as well. And also because we graduated in 2020, it'll be really good just to kind of check in and catch up with them. Kieran, lovely to see you. It's been a long time.
Long time.
Francis,
all right? Yeah.
What about our friendship, that the memories we made and stuff?
Sure. Can you send this over and I'll do a bit of a character study.
I was with you when you got that mug.
I got this mug off eBay.
Do we get paid extra if we big you up and pretend that you're a really great guy?
Wait, so you think I'm not?
I don't even know you, mate.
Are we recording now?
Yeah, we're recording now.
Right. Hi, Francis. How are you doing?
Yeah, Francis. Yeah. Good to see you, mate. Good to see you.
Maybe you should see a psychologist.
First question. Who are you and what did you study?
Hi, I'm Charlie and I studied economics.
I'm Richard and I studied natural sciences.
I'm Lloyd. I am currently studying medicine. I'm in my 5th year.
And you got a moustache.
And I have a moustache.
Hi, my name is Kieran and I studied history.
I'm Gabriel. I did biological natural sciences.
How many years ago did you study history?
We don't talk about that.
Firstly, to think back to your interview experience many moons ago, how did you go about preparing for the interview? Did you read your personal statement a bunch of times, or do mock interviews, ask people for advice? What sort of things do you remember doing?
In my personal statement, I wrote down all these books that I said I'd read. When I wrote them down, I'd read one chapter.
Yeah.
It came to interview time and I was like, shit, they could actually ask me about this.
And did they?
They did, yeah. But I made sure that by that point I had actually read it.
How about you, Charlie?
I went down the very easy route with economics of saying that I'd read the Freakonomics and the Undercover Economist, which are two of the easiest books to read.
What was kind of the most helpful thing, you think, looking
I think in
back?
practice interviews definitely is the most helpful. I also got my older sister to give me another practice interview just because I was really nervous, and having just practicing talking to someone in under stressful conditions was quite handy. And then also for my interview, I got given an article to read 2 weeks in advance. So I literally just combed through the article, came up with some questions that could have been asked based on the article. I made sure I knew the article really well because one of the interviews was basically centered around that entire article. And then I also looked at my personal statement, which my first interview was based around. Made sure I knew, so for history, you should be mentioning books and stuff that you read. So I made sure I knew what the main arguments in the books were.
I spent a lot of time reading the news to see if there's any sort of health news. I also did a bit of just trying to look through my A-level, frankly, and trying to understand anything on it.
I did one mock interview at school, but it was it could not have been further from my actual interview experience.
Right, yeah.
None of the people interviewing me had a science background. So they were just asking me questions like, what do you like to do in your free time? Really example of when you've shown readership.
One of my best mock interviews was actually with an English teacher who I liked and who I knew was really on it. She knew nothing about economics, and she gave me a passage from a Jane Austen book and asked me to read it and then ask me questions about it, from an English perspective. And it was just about how I analysed English, how I thought, how I answered the questions in an analytical way. And it was nothing to do with economics, but just answering questions in that kind of way was really helpful, even though it was literally nothing to do with English. It was just some kind of...
So literally a completely different subject, but it was...
It's just those skills you need to practice.
What did you do kind of on the day? Because I stayed in college the night before and then my interviews were in the afternoon. So I had that whole day to kind of, and evening as well, to kind of panic, and I didn't sleep.
Not good.
I actually stayed overnight at Emma too, even though I only live an hour away from Cambridge, because my interviews were in the morning and I was like, I don't want to wake up early to get the train.
Yeah, nice.
And over it, I was really nervous. I had a really small dinner of I went to Wasabi and I got just some edamame beans.
I actually spent the morning of, I just flipped through BBC News, the health section. And actually that was really helpful. That came up. So yeah, just have a bit of a
Current
rant
affairs, I think, is good,
yeah,
isn't it?
Current affairs is always really useful. At least for us, one interview was on sort of like generally what's happening in the health profession.
It's good because you're showing that you're not buried in textbooks. You're trying to apply what you've learned to the real world today. You say like you wish you read your personal statement. I was combing through my personal statement all day. I went to Central Library in the Grand Arcade, and I was going through every sentence in case like they asked me about it. What would I say? And I had this like giant Word document that I'd filled out, and then they asked me nothing about it. Zilch.
They had a huge like hall where everyone sat.
Yeah.
You know, a bit like either nervous or trying to intimidate other people. And I was like, you know what, I'm off.
He was trying to intimidate other people.
I don't know, you just get the impression. Some people, you hear some of the conversations where it was like, you know, I'm studying this and this and this at A level, and I'm the captain of this football team and all that. And people are trying to like kind of show off. Obviously, the interviews are online this year, so it's not such a big deal. If you're doing a year, watching this in a year where interviews are in person, then just do what you want. You don't have to go and sit with people.
My interview was at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. It was one of the last ones of the day. At the end of the day, there weren't that many other people there. There were like 3 or 4 other people to be interviewed who were like in the room with me. Everyone was just sitting in silence. So I followed the trend.
So I got in an email, they said pick between one of, I think, 6 options to talk about in your interview. I picked enzymes because I thought they'd be interesting, and then tried to do some research on enzymes and realized I hated enzymes. So like the first question of my interview was basically asking like, so why did you pick enzymes? And I had to try and bullshit this answer about how amazing enzymes are.
You get like I can't remember how, like maybe a half-hour gap between interviews or something.
Like that, yeah.
I spent that half an hour sort of wandering around the college, like looking at the pond and watching the ducks and stuff. If you're doing your interviews at home, like it's probably a good idea to go for a walk in between.
Yeah. I sat next to someone who had a full book about this thick called microeconomics, and I was thinking like, what are they doing? They read something and it's going to come up in the interview.
Is that like they're not just going to ask you for a fact in the interview?
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going to be like, oh, who was the economist that came up with this?
It's like university challenge.
Yeah.
For my second one, it was getting quite close to the time when no one's come, and it turned out they'd taken the wrong person to the interview.
I had that as well.
It happens all the time. Like this other poor guy must have been like absolutely terrified standing outside some random room doing an interview. But like, yeah, I got there at like 2 minutes late and they didn't care. So it was fine.
Did you know any of the questions that you were going to get asked beforehand, like from hearing gossip about Cambridge interviews?
I actually did have one. There was like, I managed to find some like notes that people had written about their interviews. Most of the stuff that I found didn't come up, but there was one thing that did come up. When it came up in the interview, I was like, yes, like. Then I answered it, and then they just moved on straight away, like onto something harder. So like, it was good that I knew that, but it's not really given me the opportunity to show any of my like logical thinking or anything.
I actually wrote down my questions after the interview.
Oh, wow.
And all the personal statement questions are quite specific to my personal statement. For the article interview, the questions were quite general. So first they asked me to give a general overview of the article and like what the argument of the article was.
Mm-hmm.
And then they asked me if I had any criticisms of the article. And then they asked about the use of sources in the article. So this was like a secondary article written by a historian, but there were like lots of sources, there were lots of like photos as well in the article. So they asked me about that.
In physical natural sciences interviews, you will pretty much always be asked to draw a graph. And it'll be like a slightly weird graph that you won't have, like, you won't know what it looks like, and you have to just kind of figure out what it looks like.
Oh yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
And it was a really easy thing that they asked me to do, and I mixed up the X and the Y axis.
Yeah, I feel like I might have done that as well,
Yeah.
actually. It's very easy to do something like that.
For me, I don't know if you'd spoken to current students before doing the interview, but I had. And she told me one of the questions. And it was weird because I hadn't like properly looked up and prepared an answer for it because I didn't think they recycled the questions. In a way, if I had looked it up and got the answer before the interview, I feel like that would have put me at a disadvantage because then I would have had to pretend I'm thinking through the question in the room and arrive at the answer eventually, as opposed to it being kind of natural, not knowing the question and actually being thrown and trying to think your way through it with the interviewer. Did you get any kind of curveball questions where I feel like it goes with that stereotype of Cambridge interviews where you get asked something completely rogue? Did you have anything like that?
Charlie?
Not that I can remember, no.
Yeah, I didn't really either. I remember, like you say, Francis, like that's what you hear about, and like I was expecting to be asked something really weird, like, and I'd spoken to a few people who'd interviewed at Cambridge in the past, and they'd been like, oh yeah, I got given a cactus and was told describe this or something like that.
Yeah,
it's like such a random thing to be asked, but yeah, mine were pretty straightforward.
I was told by everyone I asked that like they don't do the curveball questions, like they can't. They asked me, what would you do if you're a baby deer? Just like
trust you
my
using that
heart
question.
just sank. I was like, this is I was told they wouldn't do this. I think I said like I would probably go and find my mum. Like something like that. I was just like, that's such an unreasonable question.
I got given a series of just like analytical, quantitative questions, and they give you too many to answer the interview on purpose because they don't want to run out of stuff. So if you get 6 questions and they ask you about 4, it's not because you weren't good enough to finish all 6 questions. It's because they thought about some other thing they wanted to talk about for question 3, and like your answer to question 2 was good, and they wanted to push a bit further. So you don't have to get through everything they ask you.
Yeah, what were they trying to get at with baby deer? Just out
They're
of
trying to
curiosity.
get at how do animals know what is safe to eat and what you can't eat. So I was like, oh, I would do what my mum does.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, but how would you know like what to eat? I was like, I would eat what the mum deer eats.
Yeah.
Like, okay, good. Like, what if the mum deer is not around? I was like, I would eat what tastes nice.
One of my interviewers was called Dr. Anger, but the way that's spelled just makes it look like they're called Dr. Anger. And so I went to an interview with someone called Dr. Anger, and she just sat in the corner and she didn't speak. She just made notes during the interview.
You can kind of pretend that you understand more of what's going on than you do. I think they asked me to sketch a curve or something, and then I kind of nodded along, and then we just about ran out of time, and they kind of at the end they were like, oh, so we ran out of time, but like what you should have done is draw that. And I was like clever enough to be like, yeah, that's what I was thinking, that's what I was thinking.
Actually, in my second interview, like there was a solid 10-minute period where like the interviewer started with like, do you know what statins are? He was like, right, well now we're going to talk about them. And then he just like fully explained to me like how they work. The odd question, I was like, oh, and then they do this. How do you think they might do that? And I like suggested something, and he was like, good idea, but not right. Try again. And then he went on and described like for another few minutes about like what they were. And it was kind of weird. I was just kind of, I guess that I had to like be interested and engaged and like come up with ideas. But I was surprised by how much talking the interviewer was actually doing in that section of the interview.
They're both very happy to just sort of talk to me. I would say like, oh, I do what my mum does, and then they would talk for a minute about sort of deer, or so I can't remember it, and I would just sit there sort of nodding, and then they'd ask me another question, and I give like a sort of 3-word answer, and then be like, good, and then they'd sort of explain for like another 2 minutes why actually my answer was completely wrong. And like, so I ended up coming away from this interview. It's like a 20-minute interview. I'd probably spoken for like less than a minute of it. It's just me nodding at them. And
You've third wheeled your own interview.
genuinely.
There was a question they kept asking me, and I kept getting it wrong. Like, not wrong, but I wasn't getting out what the interviewer wanted me to ask. And I think she asked me literally like 5 times before the other interviewer, who was like, there was like a nice one and a mean one.
Good cop, bad cop.
Bad cop, yeah. The other interviewer was like, I think what she's trying to get at, like the other interviewer's trying to get at is X, Y, Z. And I was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I didn't get that. That was so stupid of me.
They didn't want you to fail. Like they want you to have a good go at the questions. And like when you do get a bit stuck, they will drip feed you information that will help you like get over that obstacle in your thinking.
For 3 years, these people are likely to supervise you and like organize your supervisions and like encourage your interests if you like write a dissertation and see all that kind of stuff. So they do want to just know that you're someone that is interested and can talk to them about the stuff that they're interested in.
He probably just loved statins so much that he was like, I can talk about this. It's been a long day.
You warn them into every conversation.
It's been a long day. Like it's some me time now.
I mean, I literally like looked up in the interviews beforehand and tried to think of questions to ask them, because at the end when they're like, do you have any questions? I feel like it's good to have something there. People have to talk about themselves. So, you know, give them a little question about whatever they're working on.
I feel like you don't want to come across too keen. I don't know. Maybe you guys, if there's one time you want to come across as keen, it's in your interview.
Too keen, like in a high school student. I don't really want to go here. Just kind of.
Yeah, like I'm actually looking at loads of other unis. So like,
you wouldn't know those unis. They're in a different country.
That's it. She goes to a different school. It's more like if you ask like the person who's interviewing you like some like insanely in-depth question about like
yes. Paragraph 6 of your latest research paper.
And they're just like, how much of my personal life have you trawled through? I prepared like a sort of...
a dossier.
What?
A dossier?
Dossier? It's like, oh, that's actually not in your file.
You've got more information about them than they have about you. Do you want to say a bit about how your Cambridge interview compared to interviewing at other unis?
It was actually really different. Like the Cambridge interview, as we've already talked about, was very much a back and forth discussion, a sort of testing me on different things. Whereas I found some of the other interviews, so I interviewed at Cardiff and Nottingham and Imperial. I found them very different. I mean, Cardiff and Nottingham are both MMIs, so there's multiple mini interviews, which is basically style of interviews where you have a number of stations and then you go around those different stations for about 5-6 minutes and you get asked a bunch of questions. And there isn't really as much sort of like follow-up or relationship building as like maybe like a 20-25 minute interview.
How did you feel coming out?
I think at the time I wasn't like, oh, I completely like flopped this. I was like, that was hard, but like I gave it a good shot, I think. I was able to come up with an answer for every question, which I was really worried I would go into the interview and not like be able to say anything. And even for like that question about the Latin, which I like couldn't think of anything, I eventually came up with something. So I was like, okay, I didn't literally just sit there in silence.
I don't know about you, but I felt like I did genuinely enjoy the discussion in the end, like taking the stakes out of it, which are obviously pretty terrifying. The actual content of the discussion I found quite interesting.
My second interview went by in a flash. It was 20 minutes and it felt like 5. I felt like mine went well, actually.
Really?
Did you? Oh, wow.
I've heard people say before, like, if you think your interviews went well, you're not getting in.
Really?
Yeah.
Really not. Because if you answer a question well, they will just ask you a harder question because, they like to see people answer hard questions and like watching the way people think is quite an interesting thing for them.
I was wondering, was my struggling in the interview that kind of good kind of struggling where they're watching how you think and that's really useful to observe how you think through a hard question? Or was it just because I was useless and I was just struggling? I was struggling on like the bottom tier of questions they had.
This wasn't a case of I went out thinking I perfectly defined every single thing that they asked me about. And I think study economics now, it's more like I did my best shot at every single thing they gave me and I don't regret anything. I think.
Left it all out there on the pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
The most important question I have, I think, which ultimately decides whether you're going to get an offer, is what did you wear?
I wore a suit, and I can tell you right now, it makes no difference.
Just turn up in scrubs, ready to go into surgery.
I think I just had like a shirt, like a kind of flannel shirt, not like a formal shirt. I think I was underdressed compared to most people. Like you definitely don't need to wear a suit. I think there was one person wearing a full suit and tie, and they kind of stood out. They didn't like. It's not like what I'm wearing now. Would you be fine? I'm just wearing a t-shirt, like.
Yeah. Probably don't wear a Cambridge University jumper.
Back yourself. Just find out who your interviewer is going to be. Like print off their face.
I wore a shirt and chinos with like a jumper over the top. But looking back, I'm kind of like, why did I do that? Like I could have just worn like a t-shirt and jeans. I don't think it really matters.
You don't need to have a like totally crisp or anything like that. Just wear what you want, genuinely.
Yeah. It's funny coming into the waiting room and seeing the range of outfits that people have thought was appropriate. But I'm a bit like you, Dickie. I think I wore chinos and just a shirt with a jumper. I think that smart casual is the vibe.
Exactly. Like it's the least risky strategy because you know, if they expect you to be casual or if they expect you to be smart, you're still kind of like ticking the box.
I think I literally wore a jumper and jeans. I didn't dress up or wear uniform or anything. Just comfy.
And how did you feel about that choice?
I was very confident because I'd spoken to people who'd done interviews before, and they were like Oxford interviews, and they were like, "Yeah, you don't need to like wear a suit or anything."
When you think about it, the researchers who are interviewing you like show up to work every day wearing like jeans and a t-shirt. So
and they walk around a college, their workplace all day, watching students wander around in pajamas.
Yeah.
So they have very low expectations.
Obviously, our interviews were in person, but drawing on your own experience of being interviewed online for things like jobs and thinking about what that would have been like for your Cambridge interview, what thoughts do you have about online interviews?
Make sure you always look into the camera. So if you often find yourself like not making eye contact with the camera, it's a bit weird because obviously you want to look at okay you naturally want to look at yourself or your own screen or the other interviewer screen. Obviously you should, but it does help also to kind of make eye contact with the camera. It feels a bit more natural to the other person.
Don't write notes and then try and read off them.
I have notes to hung up around.
I've made notes for me to remind myself what I'm going to say, and one of the notes is make notes.
I didn't realise you actually prepared for this.
And if you're not allowed to use a calculator, don't surreptitiously use it under the table, because it's very obvious if you're going like, I think 22 times 4 is 27 or something like that.
If you don't hear what the interviewer says, then I ask them to repeat it. Like if they're muted because they're this like bumbling old man who doesn't know how to use technology, then like tell them.
I mean, just in general, any other tips you have?
It's not really a tip for the interview, but like don't get your heart like set on the fact that you're going to go to Cambridge. Because like there's a decent chance that you're not going to get in. And then I mean, a lot of my friends like didn't get into Cambridge and stuff and were like absolutely crushed. But I feel like also if you do have your heart set on it, then it puts a lot more pressure on yourself to get in and to nail that interview. And like there's a lot of other great universities out there which you can go to. I sort of saw it as if I pass the interview and they accept me, that's great. If they don't, that means that they've judged that I'm not good enough to be at Cambridge. I don't really want to be there if I'm not good enough, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like if you don't get in, then I feel like you got to tell yourself there's a reason for that, and it's like you wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway.
Just being enthusiastic, being ready to offer answers, being ready to change your mind and think about things.
No one has natural confidence. Well, some people do, but they're weird. But like you just got to fake that confidence, I think.
You can sit there for 10 seconds and think about something. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Because 10 seconds feels like half an hour.
10 seconds feels like half an hour, but honestly, taking the time to think about something and then say it is absolutely fine.
I mean, that's pretty much your interview about interviews. So
I got through it.
Passed. So those were some Cambridge interview tips. Let me know if you found this video helpful, or if you have any other questions you'd like answering. Thanks again to my friends who kindly agreed to do this video at short notice, and also thanks to you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you do have an interview, best of luck.
This for your B-roll.
Tell us about that. What cup have you got there, Kieran?
This is an Emma cup. It's got an engraving of Old Court, which is one of the sections of college.
Ali Abdul's great if you long as you go back 2-3 years ago to see his medicine stuff at the moment.
Prime Ali Abdul.
Yeah.
If you only have one ear, where would it go? Would it go on like your forehead or like here?
Please don't add that catfishing bit in.
Well, that was the best bit.
That time I remember you.